He is absent for a couple of hours, and returns gay or dispirited, as his luck may have turned out. At 12 he is at supper, and has the night before him. How very easy all this seems! Can it be possible we have no Tom Kings? To return to Tom as he was in the arbour. Judging from his manner, he appeared to be almost insensible to the presence of his companions, and to be scarcely a partaker in their revelry. His back was towards his immediate neighbour, his glass sparkled untouched at his elbow, and one hand, beautifully white and small, a mark of his birth and breeding, crede Byron, rested upon the edge of the table, while his thin, delicate digits, palpably demonstrative of his faculty for adaptation, crede James Hardy Vaux, were employed with a silver toothpick. In other respects, he seemed to be lost in reverie, and was, in all probability, meditating new exploits. Next to King sat our old friend Jerry Juniper. Not, however, the Jerry of the gipsies, but a much more showy looking personage. Jerry was no longer a gentleman of 3 outs. The difficulty would now have been to say that he was without. Snake-like he had cast his slough, and rejoiced in new and brilliant investiture. His were speaking garments, speaking pockets too. His linen was of the finest, his hose of the smartest. Gay rings glittered on his fingers. A crystal snuff-box underwent graceful manipulation. A handsome gold repeater was sometimes drawn from its location, with a monstrous bunch of onions, Anglice seals, depending from its massive chain. Lace adorned his wrists and shoes, of which they had long been unconscious, with buckles nearly as large as themselves confined his feet. A rich powdered peruke and silver-hilted sword completed the gear of the transmogrified Jerry, or, as he now chose to be designated, Count Albert Conyers. The fact was, that Jerry, after the fracas, apprehensive that the country would be too hot for him, had, in company with Zoroaster, quitted the ranks of the canting crew, and made the best of his way to town. A lucky spice on the road set them up, and having some acquaintance with Tom King, the party, on their arrival, sought him out at his customary haunt, D'Osyndar's, and enlisted under his banners. Tom received them with open arms, gave them unlimited use of his wardrobe, and only required a little trifling assistance in return. He had a grand scheme in petto, in the execution of which they could mainly assist him. Jerry was a Greek by nature, and could land a flat as well as the best of them. Zoroaster was just the man to lose a fight, or, in the language of the fancy, to play across. No 2 legs could serve Tom's purposes better. He welcomed them with fraternal affection. We will now proceed to reconnoitre Jerry's opposite neighbour, who was, however, no other than the upright man, the Magus Zoroaster, that great name. Changed as was Juniper, the Magus was yet more whimsically metamorphosed. Some traces of Jerry still remained, but not a vestige was left of the original Dimber Damber. His tawny mother had not known her son. This alteration, however, was not owing to change of dress. It was the result of the punishment he had received at the set to at the priory. Not a feature was in its place. His swollen lip trespassed upon the precincts of his nose trod hard upon his cheek, while his cheek again, not to be behind the rest, rose up like an apple dumpling under his single eye. Single, we say, for alas, there was no speculation in the other. His dexter daylight was utterly darkened, and indeed, the orb that remained was as sanguinary a luminary as ever struggled through a London fog at noonday. To borrow a couplet or so from the laureate of the fancy, one of his peepers was put on the bankruptcy list, with his shop windows shut, while the other made nearly as tag-rag a show, all rimmed round with black like the courier in woe. One black patch decorated his rainbow-coloured cheek, another adorned his chin. A grinder having been dislodged, his pipe took possession of the aperture. His toggery was that of a member of the prize ring. What we now call a belcher bound his throat. A spotted fogle bandaged his jabbernowl and shaded his right peeper, while a white beaver crowned the occiput of the Magus. And though at first sight they would appear to be some incongruity in the association of such a battered character as the upright man with his smart companions, the reader's wonder will rapidly diminish when he reflects that any distinguished P.C. man can ever find a ready passport to the most exclusive society. Viewed in this light, Zoroaster's familiarity with his swell acquaintance occasioned no surprise to old Simon Carr, the bottle-nosed landlord of the Falstaff, who was a man of discernment in his way, and knew a thing or two. Despite such striking evidences to the contrary, the Magus was perfectly at his ease, and sacrificing as usual to the god of flame. His mithra, or pipe, the symbol of his faith, was zealously placed between his lips, and never did his Chaldean, Bactrian, Persian, Pamphylian, Proconnesian, or Babylonian namesake, whichever of the six was the true Zoroaster, vide Baal, respire more fervently at the altar of fire than our Magus at the end of his enkindled tube. In his creed we believe Zoroaster was a duellist, and believed in the coexistence and mystical relation of the principles of good and ill. His pipe being his Yezdan, or benign influence, his empty pouch his Ahriman, or the devil. We shall not pause to examine his tenets. We meddle with no man's religious opinions, and shall leave the Magus to the enjoyment of his own sentiments, be they what they may. One guest alone remains, and him we shall briefly dismiss. The reader, we imagine, will scarcely need to be told who was the owner of those keen grey eyes, those exuberant red whiskers, that airy azure frock. It was our brave co-partner of the roads, skilful surveyor of highways and hedges. In a word, Dick Turpin. Dick had been called upon to act as president of the board, and an excellent president he made, sedulously devoting himself to the due administration of the punch bowl. Not a rummer was allowed to stand empty for an instant. Toast, sentiment, and anacreontic song succeeded each other at speedy intervals, but there was no speechifying, no politics. He left church and state to take care of themselves. Whatever his politics might be, Dick never allowed them to interfere with his pleasures. His maxim was to make the most of the passing moment. Dum vivimus, vivamus, was never out of his mind. A precautionary measure which we recommend to the adoption of all gentlemen of the like, or any other precarious profession. Notwithstanding all Dick's efforts to promote conviviality, seconded by the excellence of the beverage itself, conversation, somehow or other, began to flag. From being general, it became particular. Tom King, who was no punch bibber, especially at that time of day, fell into a deep reverie. Your gamesters often do so, while the Magus, who had smoked himself drowsy, was composing himself to doze. Turpin seized this opportunity of addressing a few words on matters of business to Jerry Juniper, or, as he now chose to be called, Count Conyers. "My dear Count," said Dick, in a low and confidential tone, "you are aware that my errand to town is accomplished. I have smashed Lawyer Coates's screen, pocketed the dimmock. Here it is," continued he, parenthetically slapping his pockets, "and done t'other trick in prime twig for Tom King. With a cool 1,000 in hand, I might, if I chose, rest a while on my oars. But a quiet life don't suit me. I must be moving. So I shall start to Yorkshire to-night." "Indeed," said the soi-disant count, in a languid tone. "So soon?" "I have nothing to detain me," replied Dick; "and to tell you the truth, I want to see how matters stand with Sir Luke Rookwood. I should be sorry if he went to the wall for want of any assistance I can render him." "True," returned the count. "One would regret such an occurrence, certainly. But I fear your assistance may arrive a little too late. He's pretty well done up, I should imagine, by this time." "That remains to be seen," said Turpin. "His case is a bad one, to be sure, but I trust not utterly hopeless. With all his impetuosity and pride, I like the fellow, and will help him, if I can. It will be a difficult game to set him on his legs, but I think it may be done. That underground marriage was sheer madness, and turned out as ill as such a scheme might ever have been expected to do so. Poor Sybil! If I could pipe an eye for anything, it should be for her. I can't get her out of my head.